Welcome to the space between. This is where honest conversations live. Be prepared to explore the gap between what we say we do and what really drives growth, creativity, and change. Brought to you by MSQ. Visit msqindex.com to learn more. Join us now as we enter the space between.
Hi there, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of The Space Between. We're delighted to have with us, Seth and I are delighted to have with us today Marc Holland. Marc is a hugely experienced marketing strategist that has worked on an array of global brands. Welcome, Marc. Before we get into the questions, I would love to for you to just give us a couple of minutes on who you are, the brands that you've worked on. Happy for you to make references to anything you want to. So just give us a quick dive into your experience before we get into the first conversations.
Cool. Well, firstly, thanks for having me. I know we've had some chats by both Dev and Seth in terms of what I've done in the past. So just to give you a brief overview, I've worked in marketing for some big corporates. So I started off with Lego, moved to O2, and now working with SharkNinja. So I've got some sort of big, hefty brands on my CV. I've also done a consultancy as well. So I worked on my own as a startup. Both come with very different challenges. So my experience goes from, big corporate working with lots of agencies, big agencies, small agencies to sort of being a single entity with no brand behind you, which is equally as tough. So yeah, that's sort of just a brief intro to myself.
Brilliant. Thanks, Marc. And I'm going to open up with, on the space between, we're looking for, the conversations we don't have and actually sort of lived stories. So, it's easy to have everything sanitized. And actually, one of the reasons that we picked you was because we don't have that many sanitized conversations with you. So feel free to, to talk about whatever you feel most comfortable. So tell us, the first real opening gambit is, tell us the agencies that you love working with and why. So, it's interesting. You and I have spoken about this a lot. I've come from the client side too. I know what I was looking for in an agency, but can you just tell us what who you like working with and what do they bring to the table for you?
I love that question. So, and obviously everyone's different. So you'll get a client who has a different perspective, different needs, and different pain points to myself. I think that what you get of agencies is everyone sort of promises the same thing when you meet them. So they promise great ideas. Everyone promises to be a trusted partner, and they all promise innovation and to deliver and that type of thing. I think the agencies that really resonate with me are the ones that get to understand you and your business. And in terms of, what are your pain points? What are your objectives? What are your challenges? What are you trying to achieve? What do you need from them to help you, kind of look good in a way, and sort of be a trusted advisor? And I think, there's lots of examples of, agencies who come in and they pitch and they look great. Their suits are fantastic. They've got a massive Rolex on their hand. They tell you all the right stuff. And, I've seen 1,000 pitches like that. And probably the one agency I worked with that stood out the most was a guy who came into the O2 offices and he was wearing a really dodgy tracksuit, bit unshaven. And
Okay, for the dodgy tracksuit.
Yeah. And, very different to what we're used to. And he became one of my most trusted partners, the agency that I went to all the time, because he took the time to understand what are our needs, what we're trying to achieve, what would make us look good. What was our existing strategy that we could tie into with whatever new product, whatever new marketing campaign we're going to do. And also the bit of delivering. So the other thing, and it's probably a long-winded answer to your question, Deb, but the other thing that's really important is that building trust. And you build trust by understanding what your needs are as a client, but also delivering. And probably most importantly for me is actually saying, I don't know, or I can't deliver that. The worst situation you can have is when someone says, yeah, no problem, I'll do that. And you come back 4 weeks later and it's like, actually, we can't do that. That's the far better way for me is to go, do you know what? I have no clue, but let me go and find out. And that's how you build trust. And those are the type of agencies that I love working with. Everyone says we can be an extension of your business and we're going to support you, but the proof is in actually doing that, actually understanding where you're at and where you want to get to.
So, sorry, Deb, can I just jump in? Mark,
yeah,
is it that agencies are guilty of just turning up in sort of presentation mode? Then, I mean, they're not in questioning mode.
Spot on, Seth, spot on. So what I've experienced is you tend to, and again, this is sample size of one, but particularly if you're working for a big brand, there's an expectation that you've got big pockets, right? And that because you've got certain sponsorships, because you've got certain products, actually you've got unlimited funds. So number one is they come with, agencies come and present big ideas without any context. And on their own, they seem like a good idea, but what's the start and finish to it? What's the strategy behind it? And I'll give you an example that my man in the tracksuit, he came in at O2, we were launching an international proposition. So this was a brand new market for us at O2. And we had to go out and talk to international people living in London who were from international. So much like yourself, they're, wanting to phone home. It was all covered by sort of MVNO providers, so small providers, but actually there was a massive amount of money to be made. And I explained this all to him and a couple of other agencies. There were lots of ideas that, like you say, Seth, they were just ideas. There was no wrap to them. So there was no beginning, end, and where we're trying to get to. And they came up with a fantastic proposition, which was like, at the time, O2 had a music strategy. So what they did is said, we're going to go out into the Polish community because they're the biggest international group we have at the moment. They're easy to target. We're going to talk to them in their language, in their areas, and then bring them in to the O2 music world. And they did that eventually by holding it was called Polska Rocks. And they took Poland's second most famous rock band, held an event at the O2 that Polish customers could come and visit as long as they were an O2 customer. And the strategy was end to end. It was brilliant. And why did I like that? Because number one, it was innovative. It was ground in a bit of test, learn and reiterate. So it wasn't like a big campaign that we were going to have to throw millions at. It was actually, let's try a small group. Let's see if it works. Let's pull them in, learn some lessons, and then let's expand it out. And it also made it really easy for me to take it to the board. So they gave me an end-to-end strategy, took it to the board, and got sign-off straight away. So that's the difference between, there's often great ideas that people come with, but if you haven't got that end-to-end strategy in terms of how you're going to execute, how you're going to scale it, it kind of doesn't mean much.
I think also as well, and both of the large brands that I worked on, I go back to that deep pocket conversation, that comment that you made, and actually what they don't realise is it doesn't matter what the budget is, we're still accountable for the return. And like we need to have confidence to take it forward into the business, and I love that test, learn, reiterate. And it's sort of like, I think sometimes the agencies were so focused that I worked with were so focused on the golden pot of money that they forgot that actual, we still had to be accountable for that money. So, you do need to break it down into smaller chunks, and actually smaller chunks are able, we can get that through, can't we? So not only the end-to-end strategy. So I just think in terms of, that expand more on that sort of test, learn, reiterate, because it doesn't always have to be the big idea, does it? It can be a small idea that just, can be implemented and grown.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also this is where it's interesting, right? So you've got a lot of these big brands are tied into big agencies, right? From top to bottom. I think that I see massive opportunity to hit that sort of niche segment. So in any marketing plan, you'll notice that, you're looking at 100, probably 90% of your marketing spend in your plan has to be on, tactics that work, that drive awareness, drive reach, drive conversion. But there's always that 5 or 10% where you want to do a bit of innovation, right? You don't want to do the same thing over and over again. And I think that's sometimes a frustrating thing that can come with an embedded agency, a big agency, is that it's sort of like copy and paste in terms of tactics and strategy, which is fine for 80, 90% when you're launching a new product because you need that certainty. But at 5 or 10%, you're like, actually, let's just go and try some new stuff. But let's not try it for the sake of trying it. Let's go and try, let's go and try selling on TikTok Shop, right? But that's expanding. What can we do there? How can we align with them? And it's 5 to 10% of the budget. The key thing is it requires a bit more effort, a bit more out of your comfort zone, a bit more test and learn, like you say. You're going to make mistakes. But what's the size of the prize? Well, this is going to grow. This could be big. And if we're in the start of the journey, it's going to be brilliant because they'll become a trusted partner. So that's an example where you can really get in. Even if you've got a big company, whatever, or medium-sized company that's in with an agency already, just having that just doing the end-to-end piece, understanding the objective, having an idea that actually it's you don't have to commit a lot of money to get in, but the potential to grow big is massive. And I see opportunities like that all the time for if you're going with the right idea, as you said, Seth, it's not just presenting an idea and being flat, but what's the end-to-end strategy and how big is the size of the prize and what's the risk?
Sure.
And the risk is always, when you're doing these things, minimal. And as a marketeer, love that in a marketing. When you go and present your marketing strategy and your marketing plan, all the stuff we do on social, OLV, great. But it's that innovation that really becomes exciting. What is possible moving forward?
Can I just, you talked about big embedded agencies there. What's your view in terms of agency and agency size and capability? I mean, you as a marketer, I mean, are you looking for a single agency that can offer lots of services, or do you like to work with numerous agencies, or is it an issue that agencies, you bring them in for one thing and actually you end up working with them across a whole raft of other different projects once you've brought them in?
That's a good question. There's not a straightforward answer to that, Seth. So I think you're looking for expertise. I think is a key thing for
That's
me.
Vitally important.
Yeah, if you're looking at, it depends what area you're looking at. So if you're looking at media, you're looking for expertise, so people who know their thing. And again, this kind of depends on, as a marketeer, what your area of specialism is. So, for example, media. I know media, but I'm not an expert, and I'm not really interested in becoming an expert. So there, I'm looking for an agency that can provide the expertise. What I'm also looking for is people who can come with ideas, and I think, going back to what I said originally, you take a bit of time to understand what you're trying to do, where you're trying to go, and how you're trying to get there, but not with by spending £1 million. By actually coming up with some quite smart, short-term plans that sort of can get you into a market or get you along that path. So
Okay.
I think for me, I look for, and this is just me, I look for a mix. Like I say, that if you're spending 80, 90% of your market budget on media, you kind of, that kind of has to work. The one that probably falls in between at the moment for me is like social. So obviously you've got social, the growth of social, organic, influencers, that type of thing. I think that could be a really nice mix of, you need some big agency expertise, some, to help you with, negotiate with influencers and pick out the right. But also there's some really cool stuff you can do and some really interesting things that some smaller agencies are doing now that actually, would love to test. So again, it depends which discipline is. I think overall answer would be, obviously big agencies for expertise, but love, the small dynamic agencies that just come with a really cool idea. Obviously think about where we're at, where we want to get to.
But the most important thing is that they turn up and be the expert in the room.
I think, be the expert in the room, but also if you don't know, say you don't know. That's right. Absolutely fine. Don't know, but I'm going to find out. And And then I think also just listening to, going back to the first point, listening to their pain points, listening to the challenge, listening where we're trying to get to, and taking that away and going and working on it. Now, because what tends to happen is if you ask a media agency to do something that's outside their comfort zone, they'll shoehorn their idea into their comfort zone,
Yeah.
into media. Whereas what you want is you want to go, listen, let's all get out of our comfort zone. Let's go and do something on TikTok Shop. Let's go and do some gaming stuff that we've never done before. Let's go and do some influencer stuff we've never done before. Let's go and have a partnership with a partner that's a bit off the cuff and see where we can go. And that, and it's been open to, so you're right, it's having expertise in the areas you need expertise, but then we want to go off piste. Let's go and approach it and not try and shoehorn it into what you already know.
So I'm going to ask a question on from that. How do you, so we talked a bit about, trusted advisor and all of that. How, because sometimes agencies are a bit nervous about going off piste. And I don't mean out of their capability zone, but like coming up with a crazy idea. How do you show them the trust is both ways? Because they obviously don't want to, they want to look after you. They don't want to lose you as an account. I know what I did. What do you do to enable, to know that they can trust you, not to fire them?
Good question.
It's a good question. I think, I think, again, everyone's a bit different in this, Deb. I think I'm very much like go for it, come up. But again, if they come, it's about going back to be realistic. And to your point, we may work for a big brand, and there's a perception we've got big budgets, but we need to make everything stack up in terms of the P&L. So if you come back with $1 million, $2 million, pound idea, when we're only generating, 10, 20 million pounds of revenue, that's not going to fly. But if you coming up with, if you come up with a really funky out there idea, but it's thought through, it's not just thrown out there, then I love that. And I listen.
And you show them under the bonnet a bit more, enable them, help them develop their idea.
Exactly that. And actually go, the thing that's most important to me is feedback, right? So you know what? I don't care how crazy the idea is. If it's a thought through end-to-end idea and it's like how we're going to scale, oh my God, you know what? I'd love to do that, but we're never going to get, our brand values mean we can't do that. But let's pivot on that. What else can we go after? Do you know what I mean? That's the kind of approach I take to it. And what I've found, I'm sure you have, is you might come up with the first idea is a bit bonkers, and it's too close to the wire in terms of your brand values. But always out of that comes something else. So you start working together on, well, okay, that's where can we take this actually? Because I love the thinking. Where can we apply it slightly differently to maybe make it less controversial, less expensive, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But you don't mind, big ideas, and you don't mind expensive ideas, but the agency has got to show you the value. They've got to show you how you're going to get the return on the investment. And you want them presumably to, take a bit of risk as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I just saw one example where there was an agency I was working that one of my colleagues was working with within O2, and they're very good at retail. And she said, "Oh, you should talk to them because I think they could help you in terms of your marketing, what you're doing with partners and sponsorship and that type of thing." So I was like, "Okay, cool. Let's listen to them." And they came up with an okay campaign. I briefed them, came up with an okay campaign. I could sort of take it or leave it. But while I was thinking about it, they presented me with a bill for like £10,000 for working on the campaign. And I'll be honest, I on principle, I was like, guys, I'm never going to work with you ever again because, if you want to get into, I had quite a big area that there was loads of potential for business. but you kind of shoot yourself in the foot because, like you say, Seth, you have to have some skin in the game. You have to, unfortunately, it is the way of the world. You need to spend some money on researching, on
You've got to invest something,
understanding.
haven't you?
Absolutely. And I think, that was a real lesson for me. And also it comes down to that trust bit as well, in terms of if you need to spend money and you want to research something, I've asked you to do that. Be upfront and say, listen, we can do this. It's going to cost us $5,000. Can you put $5,000 there? I go, yeah, do you know what? Let's do it. Let's do it that way. But again, that was, it really sticks out in my mind because they came to me so many times after that. And for the sake of $10,000, the amount of money they could have made from getting in.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'm gonna go the other way now. So we've talked about cultural fit. And, I know that I've sat in front of, presentations that are exactly how you described in the opening gamut, just boring presentations of just a load of creds that just and then, you get to the end and you're yawning. But something about them is, they're a really great cultural fit. It's sort of how do you help them free themselves from the shackles of the boring, and because when you're inside a client, what's going to rock and roll from with your directors. I always knew who I had to impress, how I'd get them over the line. That was my job. But they just come still with their really boring presentations. Do you just sort of like, okay, see ya, a bit like your 10,000, or do you give them a chance and give them guidance to show culturally how they? Because you mentioned in our briefing called the cultural fit's a pretty important thing for you.
It's a good question. So I think, again, it really goes back to listening. Like, I know it sounds so simple,
Huh?
but it's so important. So listen to what the client wants. I smiled when you said about pitches, Deb, because I'd say to every agency, don't spend half an hour, going through the brief that we've given you. We wrote the brief. We don't need you to go through it to tell you so you understand it. Like, but the agencies that come and do half an hour going, here's your brief, and this is what you told us. It's like, it's really difficult not to turn off, because it's like, number one is you have not listened to what we've told you. We're making it really easy for you. And I think if someone comes with, some ideas that are thought through, and end to end, they might be off kilter, they might be off point, but that's the type of thing that really interests me. I'm like, okay, we can use that, or I like your thinking, or I like your working out. It's a bit like when you go for a job interview and someone asks you, I think the best job interviews are always when someone gives you a project and says, right, here's a task, go away, because we want to see your thinking. Now, the result might not be right. The outcome might not be quite right, but actually what you do is you get an insight into your thinking. And that's the bit that I love, because you're like, actually, I like the way these guys are thinking. I can work with that. We can work with that. It's really difficult. Don't get me wrong. It's really difficult from an agency perspective when you're presenting to a new client, because you don't know what they're like. Clients are very different to me. Some clients love to be, love to hear that they're great and, their company's great and blah, blah, blah. But again, I try and cut that out by saying right from the front, listen, don't come on that sort of stuff. And I think it's just about being, honest, authentic, doing the work, like I said, looking into what is the strategy of these guys? What are they trying to achieve? What's their current strategy? How can we take one of our ideas and implement it into that strategy to make it really, really easy for the client to go and present to the board or whoever, their marketing VP, whoever it is, to get sign off. So yeah, again, it's difficult to get away from first impressions when you meet a new, but there's, when they run through, it's funny, it just made me smile there. When they run through your brief, it's like, guys, that is going to turn me off straight away.
But can we just talk a bit more about briefs, actually, because it's quite interesting, because a lot of agencies will say that clients are very poor at giving out briefs, or increasingly, and what other agencies are saying, that briefs are being generated through AI. So for yourself, in terms of how you put together a brief, your sort of process. I mean, how do you approach it, and is it more than just a single person's task in the marketing teams? I mean, is it a sort of, is it a very rigorous process that you put a brief through?
I would love to say yes, Seth, but in all honesty, some of the briefs we do are crap, right? I hold my hands up. When you're busy and you're in your day to day and you just need to get something done, you put together a brief, and the intention, and it varies. I'll be honest, it varies from a full strategic brief with all the jobs to be done and blah blah blah, to literally we just need to, if I look at when we did international, I didn't really know what I was asking for. I was like, listen, we need to get into the international market. Don't really know how. Know a bit of background in terms of who we're trying to target. We kind of need to come up with a proposition. So really, really sketchy brief, and I'm sure I'm not the only client to be doing that.
Yeah,
You won't be.
My view is that that's an opportunity. So I see that as a big opportunity for an agency to go, do you know what? That's a bit rubbish, but let's jump on that. And rather than, I think sometimes it's even better than getting you've got more license by getting that and can interpret it any way you want. But actually just interpreting it in a way that you think is going to show the client a lot. So, that I think could be a big opportunity. I think the other thing is, the other thing I'd advise is get curious. If you get a brief, different clients work in different ways, but get curious about, get underneath the skin of the brief. What is you trying to do? What are you trying to get at? Ask the questions, a bit like you do in any sales conversation. What are you trying to achieve? What are the must-haves and what are the no-goes? If you get that opportunity, but overall, I'd say if you get a brief that's not that great, you can't question the client, then just go with what you're best at and really deliver what you think is authentically true to your agency, to your skills, and ideas that you believe in. And kind of, if a client rejects that, then I'd question whether you want to work with them anyway, because you've shown your sort of true colors and how you want to work and how you deliver. And if a client doesn't want to, doesn't believe that's the right approach, or says that's the wrong approach, that wasn't what they had in mind, I'd argue, is that the sort of client that's going to be a fit for your agency anyway?
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying that as an agency, question the brief always, whether you're doing that internally or directly back to the client. And the client, a good client should always engage on that conversation. In terms of, if an agency has questions on the brief, they should respond to that.
100%. So if you can get FaceTime with a client who's written a brief, I guarantee, well, from my perspective, the brief might be, the brief is a brief and it's one page, but you'll get so much more by just spending half an hour with a client and literally just getting curious. Just, what's behind this? Why this? What's the, all those open questions that you use in any sales conversation will make a massive difference. Massive difference.
I think as well, I know that I some of the best sessions I had when I was briefing was he's going in and doing that. Okay, I've been asked to do this and I've got no idea how to do it, and I don't really know. Can we almost put the brief together? It's and that's when I think that agencies shine, when they're given a bit of open slather, but instead of sitting there, looking a bit sort of dumbfounded, do create it as an opportunity. And I think that just opens up some awesome conversations and starts building that trust. So it's like,
yeah. So I think there's two things there. So there's two situations right there. I agree with you. When you're presenting for the first time to a client, that's one situation, because you need to build trust and you need to show your skills, and that's when it's worth having a conversation if you can get that to get curious, because it's the first time working together, etc., etc. There's another bit which you mentioned which I really like actually, and just thinking about it, it's the way I love to work in terms of bringing the agency in. If you've got an agency working, bring them really, really early and go, listen, here's what we're thinking. Here's the vision. Got no idea how we get there. No clue. We haven't got much money. how do we, like, it's an open session that says, right, can we solve this together? And you know as well as I do, when you bring people, anyone on a journey that says, right, can you help and can you input ideas, the execution is always 1,000% better, because rather than you saying, here's your idea, go and execute it, they've been part of the process to develop that idea, solve the problems on the way, pivoted, and suddenly the execution is fantastic, because because they know the background and because they know where you're trying to get to and where you've got from, they'll start coming up from ideas left, right, and center in terms of you never thought of. And that is, for any agency, once you're in, I would hammer that home. Those working sessions. Let's start, even if we haven't got much. Let's start from a baseline. Let's understand all the issues, and then that is when you start flying with a client, because together you're solving the problems. You're both coming up with problems. You're both coming up with solutions. You're coming in left, right, so that is the kind of perfect scenario with me. And that's when you truly become a trusted advisor. And a trusted advisor isn't about saying yes to everything. It's sometimes going, no, that's, I don't think that's the right way to go back. But saying no with solutions. So we don't teach you go that way, but that's because we think these three routes are actually going to be more effective for you guys in the position you're in.
Now, thank you for that. Now, we didn't talk about this in the briefing session, but I'm throwing it in. Don't get nervous. Just in terms of the current pitching process, and, you can talk about, where you are with the current business that you're working with. But what do you think of how agencies have to pitch nowadays? Is it right? Is it wrong? Is it different? Is it changing? What's your experience?
So, I'll be honest, I haven't gone through a pitching process for a few years, because we're kind of in-house here, and we've got established agencies that we use. The pitching process, I think, is really unfair. Being completely honest, when I was at O2, because it's run by, it depends. I work for big companies, sorry. So procurement became more and more prevalent in terms of pitching. And sometimes it's really difficult as a client. You'll have an agency you want to work with, but you've got a procurement team running the process. And they've got different objectives to you. You as a marketeer, you're all about ideas, execution, strategy, and who can you trust to actually make sure you deliver what you say you're going to deliver. Procurement have a different set of objectives. Whatever price they get, they want to get 10, 20% below that price. And once they've finished the pitching process, they're like, yep, our job is done. And as a marketeer, you're left with whichever.
You've got to work with them. Yeah.
Yeah, whichever agency went to the bottom. So there are ways to mitigate that. But as a marketeer, in terms of, I work closely with procurement. And, you come to a shared objective in terms of, it's not just about price, but it's about delivery as well. But going back to your question, it's really, really a tough process. And I think it's really important as an agency, yes, it's good to get in with big brands, but the bigger the brand, the more rigorous their procurement process. And it's just asking your question that, it'd be great to have that big brand on your, CV or your agency roster, because then you can attract more clients, but it comes at a price. And sometimes I feel actually you're better off starting with, there's the amount of scale ups that there's around at the moment who are looking for, marketing guidance, who need help with their strategy. It feels like, again, just be really targeted in terms of who you're going after, and recognize that great to get a big name on it, but there's always a balance in business, right?
Yeah, you just know it comes with the territory. We're hearing stuff about, it's changing. It should open up and be a little broader. So, it's actually the agency can go in and contribute to the pitch, not be subservient to the pitch, or all of that sort of stuff. And I just feel I personally feel it's a tough process. It seemed, and I'd like to think it was changing. But no, I just wanted to get your view on the pitch.
Sorry.
It's really tough. Sorry.
No, I was going to go back to procurement, actually, and just ask, have you got any advice in terms of how agencies should approach procurement? Should they have a relationship with procurement? Is that helpful? Because obviously they are a blocker. They're a blocker for both the agency and the marketing team. And how do you deal with that?
I mean, it's difficult because every business is slightly different. And again, I'm probably not. I give a view from like working with big companies, and procurement is really tricky. I guess I would ask yourselves, I would look into what it takes, what it's going to take out of you, and do you want to work with are you happy to work with procurement? Because it tends to be a long process. You need to be an agency will need to be aware there's probably an incumbent in place who's got relationships already. And also, you'll be subject to terms, right? So 90-day payment terms.
And longer.
It's up to 120 now because, and this is all procurement doing the right thing for the business, right?
Yeah.
So it's not down to them, but again, it's just, I would just ask yourself, okay, is it worth it? Is it worth it? Because even if you win that, imagine you go through, you win an account. The thing I would do, actually, thinking about it, is we did it with a couple of guys, which is to just be totally open with procurement and go, listen, we're a small agency. We can offer dynamic ideas, etc. But actually, the way we operate, we can't fork out, 200, 300,000 pounds to start a campaign and not get paid for 120 days. We need 30-day payment terms. And I guess, again, it's just being upfront and just having that conversation. And I think again, if you have that conversation and procurement are pretty rigid and they say, nope, you have to adhere to the same, 90, 120 day, terms that the big agencies do. I just question, is that the right business model for you, or should you be targeting a different type of business?
Cool. But basically, if you don't ask, you don't get.
Got to ask the question.
Again, everyone's different, because I know I've worked with people who go, no, those are the, that's the terms, that's what you need to do if you want to work with us. But you're missing out on, I'd argue you're missing out on a lot of really great smaller agencies who are niche specialists, got some fantastic people, because of your payment terms, which is mad. So it depends on your clients. So I went into battle with a couple of the agencies who were brilliant, and worked out with procurement to give them much shorter payment terms. And anything is possible, right? It just depends on the individual. And I think the best thing you can do is, like you say, Seth, ask a question early on, and you'll know from the reaction if people are willing to help you or not.
Yeah, great. Thank you,
guys. Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you so much. I'm just going to recap. I love a takeaway, and I think I just want to recap on the things that a couple of things I heard you say. I really love the cultural fit piece. Like, I think that's so important. I love the test, learn, reiterate, because it allows us inside to actually, take some really dynamic ideas. And come with those ideas. Don't just listen to the brief. In fact, really question the brief. And if the brief's a bit thin on the ground, use it as an opportunity. So those were the things that I really took away. As ever, Mark, I love every conversation I have with you. So thanks so much. And we'll see you soon.
Brilliant. Well, listen, thanks for having us on, guys.
Thank you very much, Mark.
See you soon.
Great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Space Between, where honest conversations just came to life. Brought to you by MSQ. Visit msqindex.com to learn more. Now, go forth and enter your own space between.